there's been this snowstorm going on the last couple of days over on the East Coast. There are a bunch of people stranded out on the I-95, at least at the time I'm recording this. Perhaps they've been able to move along by now. I don't know for sure, obviously. But I want to delve into a little bit about what people involved in it have been saying, and then I kind of want to give you my thoughts on what lessons we can learn from the experience that they're having over there. But before we do, my name is Dan. This is the Soule of Wisdom. Thank you for joining me here today. Please do take a moment to smash the like button if you're on YouTube. Hit the subscribe buttons on whatever podcast platform you might be listening on. Hit the punchy thing on Rumble if that's where you're finding me. And do take a moment to share the episode if you find what I have to say of value. All these things help us get the show out in front of other people. We are growing. We will grow faster with your continued support. So thank you. Okie dokie. Let's go ahead and pull up an article from NBC News and kind of dig into what's going on here. Again, this is at the time of recording. Things may have changed at this point, but there's still a lesson to be learned here. So if the details are different, please still do play along. So the headline is Cars, as far as I can see, drivers still stranded on I-95 in Virginia after winter storm. Okie dokie. Drivers along a 50-mile stretch of Interstate 95 in Virginia have been stranded in freezing temperatures for hours after a crash involving multiple vehicles brought the roadway to a standstill, and the first mid-Atlantic storm of the year dumped more than a foot of snow on the region. U.S. Senator Tim Kaine is amongst those caught in the chaos, with the Democrat from Virginia tweeting just before 8:30 a.m. on Tuesday that he had been stuck in traffic for at least 19 hours. I started my normal 2-hour drive to D.C. at 1 p.m. yesterday. 19 hours later, I'm still not near the Capitol, he wrote in a tweet. Kaine said his office was in touch with the Virginia Department of Transportation to see how we can help other Virginians in this situation. By 10:30 a.m., he said he was frustrated but not in serious trouble. Governor Ralph Northam said his office was working to respond to the situation on I-95. State and local emergency personnel are continuing to clear downed trees, assist disabled vehicles, and reroute drivers, he said in a tweet. An emergency message is going to all stranded drivers, connecting them to support, and the state is working with localities to open warming shelters as needed. And then they talk more about trying to open stuff up. Seb Lancaster, 21-year-old filmmaker and television student at Boston University, was on his way to visit his father in Connecticut with his twin sister, her boyfriend, and his dog when they got caught on the interstate and found themselves stuck, forcing them to spend the night trapped in a frigid vehicle. My parents are immunocompromised, and I assumed road travel would be safer than Omicron flights, he said, referring to the transmissible COVID variant. He was frustrated with what he described as a lack of communication and vague statements coming from VDOT. I'm 2.5 hours on hold to speak to a representative for any information, Lancaster said. I've seen one emergency worker who, when I asked for information, said, "Does it look like I know?" Well, I'd hope you'd know, Officer Lancaster said. And then it kind of goes on and on with more people sharing similar stories about how they're frustrated with the lack of information and the lack of government response. But not a whole lot of people talking about necessarily how they're managing to fend for themselves. Okie dokie. So, first off, it sucks to be trapped in these things, and I recognize that. When I was a youngin', we took a 3-week trip down to Florida in the middle of winter. And on the way back up, we got hit by this huge snowstorm. And it caused this huge accident in front of us, and this was on the I-75. I believe it was either Georgia or Tennessee, somewhere in that area. And the thing came to a standstill for hours, and it was crazy. Cars sliding off mountainsides and everything else. I remember seeing this one semi that had kind of jackknifed, and the cab was hanging over a cliff, and the driver was still in the cab, unable to get out because there was no way for him to get out without just falling to his death. So these kind of things are certainly serious, that's for sure. But there's one thing that I remember back when that happened, and that's that, first off, motorists were really working to try to take care of each other. For example, we were coming back with a load of oranges that we had picked up when we were in Florida. And rather than sit there and let the oranges freeze, I remember that my mom was going through the traffic backup and handing out oranges to people so that they could have something to eat. So, you know, exchange of information, exchange of supplies, kind of people taking care of each other. But we also, I remember when I was young, and, you know, I used to live up in the snowy regions. I don't currently. I live in Arizona now, but at the time, for much of my life, I did. You would travel with what you needed to handle whatever might come at you. You know, in the winter months, I always had things like emergency blankets, weight in the back of the car, like a bag of sand, which can help you get unstuck if you need to. I always had like a shovel, jumper cables, things like that, ways to fix a tire. You travel with things that you need to be able to ride stuff out. And generally speaking, too, I would have things like water, some kind of snack, stuff like that in the car to tide me over in case I ever got stuck somewhere. Down here in Arizona, I'm not too concerned about snow, but I still do travel with things like a tire pump, a way to fix a flat. I have a jump starter that's in the car, things that I might need to handle any kind of issue that I might run across. But what was interesting in the article, and I didn't dig too much into it because the article was super long and I could have gone on for hours reading the stupid thing, but they were complaining very much about the lack of response from the government. But what are you doing for yourself? You have to, at some point in your life, figure out that you have to take responsibility for what goes on with you and what goes on in your world. You have to understand, okay, here's what I'm going to go do today. What kind of pitfalls, what kind of obstacles might I encounter, and then plan for them. The idea that people would be out on Interstate 95, presumably they knew the snow was coming. I mean, you know, the meteorologists can definitely be wrong with their predictions, but they'll generally be wrong on the amounts, not so much is it going to snow or not. So if you know that snow is coming, you should have stuff with you to be able to handle any kind of snow emergency. But it seems like a lot of these people didn't. So that would be my first takeaway from this, is you've got to be prepared for whatever might come at you in life. And hopefully these people can take this as a lesson to do that and then set themselves up to be able to handle situations better. Now, I'm not ragging on these people and saying that they're worthless or something like that. I think they just don't know. But hopefully they know now. You have to be prepared for what might come at you as best as you can be. But so many people aren't. We just walk through life day by day with just kind of this I'll figure it out attitude, or you know, somebody else will take care of it. Which leads me to my second point on this, and that's that we rely way too much on the government and the government systems to bail us out of trouble. This article was rife with stories of people who are complaining that they weren't able to get help fast enough. You know, they were on hold for 2 hours, they were slow to respond, we're still sitting out here, all these things. You rely so much on the government and the government programs and the government policies and everything else to get you through your day-to-day. But the truth of it is the government is not very good at almost everything. They really aren't. You know, take a look at the COVID response, for example, and how it's jumped back and forth between don't mask, mask, mask here, don't mask here, do this, do that. Take this, take that, do this, do that. Shelter, don't shelter. Quarantine, don't quarantine. Quarantine for 10 days, no, 5 days. It just keeps changing and changing because the government is imperfect. And why is it imperfect? It's imperfect because it's made up of imperfect human beings. So it can't be your God. It can't be your savior. You have to be your savior. You have to be able to help yourself. And unfortunately, so many of us now, we just try to rely on what the government and what the different agencies and stuff might be able to do to help us. But then when something drastic goes down, we're not prepared because we haven't taken the time to make sure that we can take care of ourselves. And I think that's what a lot of the people out on the I-95 have hopefully figured out, is that if you're relying on somebody else to come help you, you're probably going to be waiting a very long time, no matter what the situation might be. I mean, you can look at police response, for example. I believe that the average response time for the police across the United States is something like 12 minutes. But by the time that passes, whatever crime you're trying to get help with, whatever crime you're trying to get them to defend you against, that's over with by the time they get there in most cases. The police are so often, they're playing cleanup. And that's not their fault. It's just, it is what it is. But we think that they'll be able to defend us when in reality we need to be able to defend ourselves. That's just another example. So that is my takeaway from this story, is that we need to do a better job of being prepared and being able to take care of ourselves, and we need to stop relying on somebody else to do it for us. Let me know what you think about that in the comments. I'm going to go ahead and leave it there for now. Thank you for watching. Next segment is in 3 hours. I'll see you then.